There's two sides to every coin. Then there's a conversation you can join. But I'm an old dog and there's new tricks. And some of my opinions you just can't fix. 'Cause I'm an old man yelling at the sky. I'ma shake my fists at the clouds and cry. Get off my lawn, you snowflake, before I have a meltdown, breakdown, shakedown. 'Cause this is my hometown, so back down, sports clown. It's all just a game, and it's the last down, let down, cowtown. I said it's all just a game. I give the touchdown, the rundown, the lowdown. 'Cause it's over the game, gonna crack down, shut down, the sundown. I said it's all just a game.
Brilliant. There you go. Hey, brilliant. Good job, Jackie. Hey, good job, Jackie. Didn't fall off the cliff. We always fall off the cliff. We didn't fall off the cliff. Hey, kids, welcome to Just a Game. I would be me. You would be you. Welcome to the program. It is an inclusive program. Everybody is welcome here. And we are proudly broadcasting from Treaty 7 territory. And that is somewhat important and significant today because it is National Indigenous People Day. And we're going to talk a little bit about that later on. But holy cow, a lot going on in the old hockey world, or at least the potential for a lot going on in the old hockey world. If you like rumors, if you like gossip, yes. But actual concrete stuff, not yet. It's coming. It's coming. I have it on good authority. It's coming. The Hall of Fame class will be introduced here in the next little while by the Hockey Hall of Fame. Of course, Lanny McDonald, friend of the program, is a huge part of that. And there was a picture just a little while ago of him making those calls. And, maybe later on we can retell the story about when Jerome McGinley got the call from Lanny and thought it was a joke. Anyway, this is a great day for a lot of people. We are a little over a week away from the draft, but not the draft activities. The awards are not that far away in the National Hockey League. All of that taking place in a little town called Nashville, Tennessee. Oh, you remember Nashville, don't you? 20 years ago when you were all poo-pooing it, saying, why is it in the NHL? Why is there a team in Nashville? Why? And now we all want to be there. And I am incredibly jealous. I have no problem. I am old enough to understand my shortcomings. Jealousy is one of them. I will not be there, but we have sent our best people there, and we will be talking about that, or we're going to send our best people. They're not to suggest that we sent them there 2 weeks early would be a gross mismanagement of funds. That's not what we're doing, but we will send them there next week when it's important. I don't normally do this. This is a unique opportunity for this show, Just a Game with yours truly. I came in today, and there was food here. Normally, the barn burner guys leave, the boxes and the empties, but never the food. But there was a little bit of food today. So just a shout out to Connie and John's Pizza here in Marda Loop. My understanding is knocked on the door, said, we just want to be good neighbors. Here, try our pizza. It's thin crust and it's frickin' delicious. I'll say this. I don't know why. I don't believe that I've ever gone on any broadcast medium, be it print, television, or radio, and ever talked about the tanginess of the sauce. But this had a very tangy sauce, and I enjoyed it thoroughly. So Connie, not that Connie, by the way, I checked that because it would be a little disappointing to me if the new general manager of the Calgary Flames was spending his time making pizza pies. Right? And that's how old I am. I just refer to them as pizza pies. Excuse me. You might want to stay a safe distance away from your speaker today. I am coming off a cold. I certainly don't want to get anybody sick. A little later on, we'll introduce you to a new friend of the program, Dr. Tyler White, scheduled to join us. But right away, let's bring on our first guest, brought to you by Ski Cellar Snowboard, skicellarsnowboard.com. 70, can you believe it? 76 years. I'm pretty sure by the time the snow flies, it's going to be 77, right in that range. One location open for the summer, but it's worth your time and effort. McLeod Trail by Chinook Center. Go, dream, see what is coming, see what is there, see what you could be doing in October, November, December, when the snow starts to fly. It is currently not flying. It was flying, I got to be honest with you, in Jasper, up in Hinton area. I believe Banff and Kananaskis had warnings as well. Oh, and in case you missed it, 10-year anniversary of the flood. We'll get into that later, but right now I'm just telling you about Ski Cellar Snowboard, skicellarsnowboard.com. You know him, you love him, is the managing editor of FlamesNation. He is one of the aforementioned geniuses that we are sending to Nashville. We are sending all of our top people. I saw you smile when I said that before. We're sending all of our top people to Nashville. Ryan Pike joins us. How are you?
Good. I'm this is the as someone who loves just picking apart roster construction decisions. This is the time of year that's really exciting to be doing this, because it's a new GM, so all of our this is we're in a way behaving without a net here, because we have no sample size for Craig Conroy as a manager, as a guy running a draft. I mean, he's been involved in the decisions for the last decade. It's not like they go, "Shut up, Conroy, go sit in the corner." They've been listening to him. He's been very much involved in, especially the draft side. He's been one of their, if they want to get some eyes on somebody they think is pretty special, they send him. So they definitely value his opinion prior to this point, but now he's, the buck stops with him. So the guy on the phone, the guy saying, make that pick, make that trade, sign that guy, that's Craig Conroy. And we have no sample size for him as the final say. And that makes it kind of exciting because, for better or for worse, I think since maybe that first summer, the summer of 2015, where Brad Living really put his hooks into the team and really started kneading the dough and morphing it into what he wanted it to be. I think it's safe to say we've had a pretty decent handle on sort of what to expect from him. But with Craig, I mean, we know that Craig feels differently about a lot of different things than Brad does, but I think philosophically they sort of believe in a lot of the similar things. But just what kind of stamp are we going to see put on this? Historically, Rob, you remember, there's been the 2000, the first draft for Craig Button, but Craig wasn't allowed to be at the table, so he couldn't really do much of anything beyond make a few trades, and they were not bad trades, but there was also an expansion draft to deal with then. So 2001 was really Craig Button's first real year of being able to put his teeth into it. The 2011 draft, the first one for Jay Feaster, I think sneakily one of the better drafts in franchise history, because everybody they picked went to the NHL. One of them, their seventh rounder, just won a Stanley Cup. Laurent Brossoit. And 2015, the first.
But can I stop you there? 2011, you remember too, John Weisbrod was not allowed to be at the draft table because he had just been hired away.
He was still at the table in Boston. I think he'd interviewed and he said, "Okay, you're finishing up July 1. You'll come on over." But he was, I believe at the time, he was the head of college scouting for the Bruins. And he could wander over after the draft, but imagine if you're sitting at that table when you see they get at 104th some small kid from Gloucester Prep who played in the USHL for a year, some shrimpy kid who ended up scoring like a point a game for the better part of a decade. I mean, those are the kind of things. I mean, Brian Burke always joked about this. You don't judge drafts by stopwatches. You got to use calendars. And in retrospect, I mean, 12 years on, that 2011 draft class, but Sven Berge, the first, didn't really turn into much of anything. So
he didn't. He could have. But what's funny about that, and I'm the old guy, and I hope you don't take this the wrong way, because I'm pretty sure.
Can I interject momentarily?
Yes.
Breaking news. Guess who just got inducted into the Hockey Hall of Fame?
Mike Vernon?
Mike Vernon.
Yay! Fantastic.
So now I get to write something about the Hall of Fame.
Okay.
I'm a big Mike Vernon guy. Sorry. Not to derail your train of thought here, but I think that's pretty damn cool.
That is really awesome. There's Vernie, and I just saw Lundqvist's name, so we'll get them all caught up here. But I think it is. I think it's I just, and I'll give you my rationale, Ryan. Let's go down that path since we brought it up. We'll come back to the draft. It's not going anywhere. What I liked about Vernon, or what I liked about his candidacy, is 2 Stanley Cups in 2 different eras. Conn Smythe could have won the Conn Smythe in both of those eras as well. Won it with Detroit, so he won it in the latter one. But he started in the stand-up era and finished in the butterfly era and was successful in both eras, and was, by today's standard, a smallish goalie, right?
Yeah.
I think it's a great story, and I think it's so well-deserved, so I'm really happy for him.
Yeah, I grew up here in the 90s. I'm a Calgary kid. My formative years until he became a Detroit Red Wing were spent in Section J2 watching Mike Vernon play some pretty damn good hockey. And, like you said, I mean, his career sort of straddled the dead puck era. Like he was successful in the 80s when pads weren't really a thing and defense wasn't really a thing. And, your defense were basically just your scorers that played further back, Paul Reinhart style.
Yep.
And then as the game changed, he was able to sort of adapt his style and be successful. So, I mean, it's with goaltenders, you never really know because, with the Hall of Fame process, it's what 18 people can convince themselves is important in any given year. And for the most part, I think they get it right. And, there's occasional ones where you can sort of, squint and go, I guess. But I think Vernon's such an easy one to be enthusiastic about because he was so important to 2 really important eras and 2 really important franchises in the league.
What's your go-to for Hall of Fame? This is what I've always, one of them's really simple and one of them's kind of objective or subjective. I feel like if that person became the adjective to describe other players, he's Mike Vernon like. And Mike Vernon Hall of Famer doesn't roll off the end of the tongue, right? That's, I know, so simple, but and I love the man. Eric Goddard Hall of Famer. No. But you know what I mean? Mike Vernon Hall of Famer. Those, and I know it's not a sophisticated system and people do it a better job, but I think you could look at goalies and go, he's very much like Mike Vernon, plays like Mike, like he becomes that descriptor.
Yeah. And, he was one of those sort of smaller battling types of goalies where, we always joke with this and, Rob, having played the position, I know you have strong feelings on this.
I own equipment. Let's be very careful about how we describe that.
That's a good way to phrase it.
Yeah.
Having never played the position with me, like, there's always that trend. And I think we're sort of seeing it continue in the modern era of big goalies, and the guys, they play that position by being big, not by being technically sound. And the biggest compliment I can play Vernon as a non-goaltender is A, he always seemed like he was in the right position, and B, he never seemed like he was out of position. Like he was always like, he could battle, he could stay in games, like he could make saves that you go, I have no idea how he made those saves. And if we're being homers here, I mean, Mika Kiprusoff is flat out the best goaltender the organization ever had.
I think so. Yep.
But I think Mike Vernon was the goaltender of the best teams they ever had. If you look, he got the starting job from Reggie Lemelin as a call up. There was that, I think in 85, 86, they brought him up midseason, and they had that first round series. I think it was against Winnipeg, and they used Vernon because Vernon had a better regular season record against the Jets because, Lemelin just couldn't stop a beach ball for some reason against the Jets for some reason, even though he was an exceptional goalie everywhere else. So they went with Vernon in the playoffs, and Vernon just went nuts that first round, and they ended up going to the Stanley Cup final that year. And then you couldn't get him out of the damn crease. And, he was in the crease until they felt they needed to make room for Trevor Kidd in 96. And I could, they had some young guys they wanted to bring up. There was a lot of economic reasons where, we saw, so many players in the 90s, especially in the first half of the 90s when the oil price crashed and the Canadian dollar crashed and all these American teams kept spending and spending and spending. I mean, the Flames simply couldn't pay what these guys, quite frankly, deserved to be paid. It was a thing that we saw throughout the entire decade. I mean, Joel Otto left because, the money, there's a lot of guys like that. McInnes, Suter, the list goes on, ending with Fleury in 99. And it wasn't really until, the salary cap got put in 05 that Like we could have a depressing conversation about this later on. I don't think people appreciate how close the team was to relocating.
Thank you. You just said
during the late 90s and early aughts.
I agree with that. And Peter Marr talks about that. And Eric Dahachek talks about that. I think we have this glossified sense of history now because of the salary cap. But that whole era of the Canadian Equalization Fund was an attempt by the guy that everybody hates, Gary Bettman, to keep the teams in Canada.
And Harley Hotchkiss.
He was absolutely as the chairman of the board of governors. Absolutely.
You unfortunately, it was a fight at the board level for much of the 90s and aughts for these owners of small market Canadian teams to convince their large market counterparts to do any kind of revenue sharing.
Right.
And then finally they got convinced and ended up working out for everyone. And I think in retrospect, it seems like such a smart thing to be doing, but it was such a fight and such an uphill battle because if you're rich and you can spend whatever you want, you don't want to be told to give your money to poor teams. You don't want to be told not to spend. Correct. So, I mean, yeah, it's but that's a long way of saying Harley Hotchkiss, Hockey Hall of Famer as a builder, well deserved. And it's very cool to sort of see so many of those guys from the '89 team be enshrined because until there's another parade, I think that team is always going to have a really special place in this community's heart. But also, I mean, it's until there's a parade, they're the only Big Four team that we have that have had that kind of success. So,
but I would also add something that makes that group special too to this day, and it's more in my wheelhouse, I suppose. But the bulk of them that are still here are very active, right? Mike Vernon's part of the Flames alumni. He's doing stuff in the city on behalf of the Flames still now. And that '89 team is so well represented and still in the community. You don't see that very many places, but you see it here. And I think it's awesome. I can't wait. I still haven't seen. Have you seen the full?
From our pal Frank Seravalli, the full list. It's goalie heavy. Henrik Lundqvist, Tom Barrasso, Pierre Turgeon, Mike Vernon, women's hockey legend Caroline Ouellette, and the builders this year are Ken Hitchcock and Pierre Lacroix.
Well, Pierre, I get Ken Hitch. Okay, Kenny, sure. I like the group. Disappointed that Mo Gilney's not there. I won't lie.
Yeah, I mean,
but you know what? Eric Dahachek was talking about this, and it was something that you said right off the top that needs to be people need to be reminded about this, is that you have to have 75% of the vote in the room, but the room changes, right? So why today? Well, because the room that it was decided in today agreed with it. So it's not the same, like Mogilny's going to get there. I'm convinced of that. I thought it would be this year. Pierre Turgeon, yeah, he was a good player. Tom Barrasso is sneaky.
Multiple Stanley Cup, Tom Barrasso.
Right, but he was also, I believe, correct me on this one, the last high school hockey player, goalie anyway, to jump from high school to the NHL. Back me up on that one. I believe I am on that one, right?
I think you're right.
And he was an American, which was, at that time, he was ahead of Mike Richter and that next wave of American goalies. Yeah, I like this group. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think the challenge is, especially in the expansion era, I mean, there's so many damn good players coming out nowadays. I mean, Mika Kiprasov's eligible, and he seems like it's someone who might get in eventually, but it's one of those things where everybody in that room brings in a name or two, and then they have a conversation about it. And the guys who tend to get the most traction in the conversation are the ones that get in. But it's not, I guarantee you, they've talked about Mike Vernon before. Different combinations of people talked about Mike Vernon before.
Absolutely.
And this was the year they went, we're doing Mike Vernon.
But to me, it also seems like that this room is more goalie friendly, right? Because it's not often you get two goalies in the same year, let alone get three goalies. And I'm not going to do this because I'm going to screw myself, but I'm thinking I don't remember a year in which there were three goalies, right?
I can't remember. I got to look at the list.
Yeah,
when I write something on Vernon, I got to look at the list.
Well, then put that in there. As the big dummy I was on the podcast with said, that's how I would start it. You feel free to use that. No, I listen. Pierre Turgeon is another guy that I think played in an era with some bigger names that overshadowed his accomplishments. but was a very effective hockey player. Pierre Turgeon, Hall of Famer? Yeah. Have I compared players to Pierre Turgeon? Sure, I have. And Ouellette deserves to be there. Hitchcock deserves there, and Eric Lacroix for what he did with the Avs, right?
This comes up every year, and I think rightfully so.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. Like, I don't like the cap of 2 women per year. I just think, especially with
it's silly.
Like, there's so many fantastic female players that are capable. Like Cassie Campbell-Pascal is in the Hall of Fame. I mean, I know she's on the committee, and it'll be kind of
she will nominate
herself. But it's kind of like, there's for this current generation. I don't mean to make Cassie sound old, but for this current generation of players, like the PHPWA and the PHF era of players, she was so important to so many young hockey players, regardless of gender, growing up, who saw those powerhouse Canadian international teams,
and remains. And does she not remain Hockey Canada's most successful captain?
I don't know that for a fact, but it sounds right.
She was for the longest time,
and I'm sure like there's plenty. She has plenty of counterparts with USA Hockey and in European hockey, that just so many exceptionally strong female candidates that just aren't in, because in part I think because of the cap. So, I
got to tell you, dude, I hosted an event in this city, and I'm not going to say with who, and I'm not going to name names, but it was just prior to the establishment of putting women in the Hall of Fame. Like it wasn't happening. And I sat up there with some pretty prestigious names globally in the game. And one European and one Canadian said absolutely. And one prominent Canadian said, I don't think so. And that's not 2 decades ago. So we're still dealing with some old time thinking. And I agree with you. And the other part of this that I feel like compelled to say every time, it's not the NHL Hall of Fame. It is the Hockey Hall of Fame, right?
Well, think of it, like Sergei Makarov, didn't play a ton in the NHL. He was a Hall of Famer before he put on a Flame sweater.
Thank you. Exactly. That was just icing on the cake, right?
Yeah. Imagine how much fun it must have been for Cliff Fletcher to land a guy who was basically already in the Hall of Fame before he even came over.
Let me ask you. Yeah. By the way, Roman Chervenka, best player not in the NHL. Holy cow, he's scared of his own shadow. Or Sergei Makarov, to your point, already a Hall of Famer before he even came over here. It's two different stories. Let me ask you this one, because I'm not even sure where I land on it. Paul Henderson.
Here's where I stand on it. So Makarov had such a body of work, like a ginormous, stupendous, like I'd say him and Tretiak and Krut, basically, pretty much the entire Soviet hockey team, and so many others who played internationally. Like there's so many guys that have a body of work outside the NHL that when you induct them, you can say, well, it's not the NHL Hall of Fame, it's the Hockey Hall of Fame. Yeah. So when Makarov got in, I went, that makes a lot of sense. He's Sergei goddamn Makarov. Paul Henderson himself has said, Paul Henderson doesn't think Paul Henderson has the body of work outside of that goal in 72 to get to be inducted into the Hockey Hall of Fame as a player. I'm not inclined to argue with Paul Henderson.
No, but would you be okay if I started a dialogue about, because you just said, why are we limiting the women, right? I think the women should have more opportunity. Builders are interesting to me. I think and I know they have their own, but it's the same as the broadcasters. And we talked about this with Eric last week. Peter Marr has a plaque at the Hall of Fame, but he is not an honored member.
Yeah, right? He's been honored by the Hall of Fame.
Right.
I believe that's the NHL Broadcast Association nominates folks for the Foster Hewitt Award.
Right.
The PHWA nominates someone every year for the Elmer Ferguson Award.
That's right. But they are not honored members. They're honored by, and it's an important distinction. Bill Hay always corrected me on that. That it's a distinction. I believe
it's the inducted into the Hall of Fame, honored by the Hall of Fame.
Correct. And then I believe if you go to the Hall of Fame, the trainers, and I apologize, I should know their association, but the Trainers Association, Farm.
Bearcat Murray's in there.
Right. but they're not honored members, but they're there.
Yeah.
And I think the same thing with officials. Like, I think, we need to do more to popularize and honor people who have dedicated their life to the sport, which is a long way for me getting to, should there be some recognition for moments? Because if
I would
there's
think so.
Right. And then Paul Henderson, right?
This is an apples and oranges thing, but UFC was just in Vancouver. UFC's Hall of Fame has they honor fights, like, key fights.
Yeah.
And so I think if the idea is that you're trying to, like, maybe they're not enshrined the same way that, builders or players are, but having something, especially if the idea is the Hockey Hall of Fame is the idea that if you took someone with amnesia, like they just, came out of a coma and said, what is this hockey thing? You should be able to tour them to the Hockey Hall of Fame, and they should be able to understand what's important to the sport and why, like sort of get a gist of its history. Like, it should be at its core sort of the Smithsonian of hockey. And it's pretty close to that. I think they do 95 of it, really well. I think that 5% is just sort of figuring out a way to, if there's things that should be enshrined, like Paul Henderson, like
rivalries.
McKinley and Crosby are already already going to be Hall of Famers, but the goal in 2010,
absolutely. I think, and rivalries. I mean, the Islanders, Rangers, the Oilers, the Flames, and just, or series or game or whatever. I think we need to be a little bit more open-minded about it. That's not detracting from the people who have their name called. That remains the ultimate honor, right? And the ultimate honor is first ballot. And to me, it's just different degrees of it. But I like the UFC idea. I think because Paul Henderson means as much to this country as maybe any of those Hall of Famers.
Yeah. And correct me, is he part of the Order of Canada?
Oh yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. And
Walk
Canada
of Fame,
has
I believe Walk of Fame, and again, the only one, and it's a constant debate, is should he be in the Hall of Fame? And it's the Hockey Hall of Fame, so he should at least be considered, and I think he has been considered. But again, it's getting 75% of that room to go. The body of the work. That moment is so special, so important. It should have something in the Hall of Fame.
Here's the thing that I'm thinking about though. So like,
by the way, this is the clip we used today, Jack. This is the perfect clip here.
You mentioned sort of the change of the composition of the selection committee over time.
Yes.
The thing that I'm curious about is, like, obviously I think, the more of your contemporaries, as a player, like say, Ron Francis is on the selection committee. He played against Mike Vernon his entire career. David Boyle's on the selection committee, Joe Sakic, and so on. So many of these guys played with them. And now we're going to probably, in the next 15 years, as people sort of cycling out, and we get sort of the younger cohort in, it'll be people who grew up watching so and so and such and such. Here's the thing that I'm not sure how it's going to go. For my generation, people in their 20s and 30s now, 2010 was the big international moment. 72 doesn't register for me as much because I wasn't alive.
Absolutely. I understand that.
And I think that is the thing I'm really curious about, because, once you get into, things that matter to groups of people, there's some subjectivity, because if you change the composition of the group, it means different things.
96. Here we are talking about the greatest Canadian moment. You talk to Conroy, you talk to Roenick, you talk to Americans. That 96 World Cup team's important, right? Yeah. The whatchamacallit, the 80 team at Lake Placid, they got the crap kicked out of them by the Russians in Madison Square Gardens. Like, it was a Rocky story. They weren't the best team.
Yeah, like miracle on ice does not mean a hoot to Canadians. No. But the Flames drafted Jim Craig, and Jim Craig was people in Atlanta were legitimately jazzed that Jim Craig was in the organization.
I remember talking to Mitch Wall, who the Flames drafted in the second round back in 2008.
The pride of Seal Beach, California.
Right. But he talked about what 96 meant to him. Right. And there's a lot of American kids, because they didn't beat Canada in one game. They beat them in a series. Now, it wasn't a long series, but they beat them. Right. Yeah. So it's important, to your point. Finland and Sweden, like, one of the indelible moments in my mind, I believe it was 2010, was it not? The Finns winning the bronze and celebrating like there was no tomorrow.
I believe so.
Right. I'll go you one better. does the Scottish Wayne Gretzky, Tony Hand, deserve to be in the Hall of Fame or honored at some point in the Hall of Fame? Go back and look what he did in his league, right? Whether we like it or not, it's a recognized league. And he did get a chance in North America, didn't
and I think if we're banging it's not the North American Hall of Fame drum.
Yeah.
I mean, we just had an incredible moment for Latvia at the Worlds.
Oh,
we've seen Slovakia. So I think it's a really cool idea. My only thought would be you got to figure out whose moments are you putting in. How do you decide which moments? Because I don't think you'd have trouble.
You brought up a really good point, though.
Great moments every year, and like you go if you grab 10 Europeans, 10 European hockey fans, depending on what country they're from, you can get completely different moments.
Do you want a moment, or do you want a special award? You know what I mean? The Hall of Fame has a special award. So this year, we're going to give the special award to Paul Henderson because of the goal and the impact it's had on the country. Next year, we're going to give it to Latvia.
They do that with the Oscars. They have honorary Oscars they give.
Right.
It's basically we don't have anything in particular that we want to honor you for, but the committee decided that you're awesome, and we think you've done enough for the
lifetime achievement.
Yeah, I think, if there's key teams, key people, people involved in key moments, I think the idea of, if the idea is you really want to, bang the drum for the sport of hockey worldwide, I think, and, think about this, like, we every year, like, as someone who didn't really watch a lot of women's hockey until recently, the easiest way for me to understand the history of women's hockey was reading a lot of the really great work that was done about these earlier inductees, because that way I can understand, okay, why is this person important? Why are they being held to the same, level as these other Hall of Famers? And I think you could do a lot for the awareness of international hockey, especially, in countries that are just emerging as hockey powers, because, everyone knows the Canadian hockey story. Everyone knows the American hockey story because we're so loud about it, And I mean, rightfully so, because, these are really cool moments we're celebrating. But I mean, getting an idea of like, okay, what's the miracle on ice for Swedish hockey? What's the miracle on ice for Latvian hockey? What's the miracle on ice for some of these, some countries that are, have never played in the, the championship level of these international tournaments, case in point, Japan, I believe in the 98 Olympics, the Japanese hockey team, I believe it's either the men's or women's hockey team. I apologize if I get the detail wrong, but they scored one goal in the tournament. But it was their first goal they'd ever scored at the Olympics. They'd never been to the Olympics before, and it was it was a gigantic moment for that country's sporting history. So, I'm all over this. Sounds like a really fun idea.
Well, I would, to your point about take it away. Not that there's anything wrong with this voting group, but create a voting group that can properly vet this stuff. Right? Doesn't have to be this group. This group can take care of the honored inductees, but create a group that could, do a good job with international voices.
I believe the Broadcast Association has their own process for the Foster Hewitt, for the Elmer Ferguson. The PHWA has an internal committee, and people every year the membership is asked, "Hey guys, send us your pitches, send us a blurb." Sell us, nominate someone, sell us on person X for this award. And every year the call goes out, and every year they get a really good cross-section of historical figures from, both, current and, people who aren't really active as much anymore. And it's so cool. Again, it's so cool sort of learning that type of history from all these markets, because you get sort of, you get a really cool snapshot of who were the great storytellers in these markets. And we could flip this on, having a group find the great stories.
What's your favorite part of the Hall of Fame?
Oh God, this is when I go there, I love the vault because of the
fair enough. But I love the international part where you go down. Here's Israel's jersey. Here's the Philippines jersey. Here's Turkey's jersey. Like it doesn't matter. They're Canada 10 years ago in FIFA. That's what they are, right? Like I'm old enough to remember when Switzerland was an afterthought. Switzerland damn near won the world championships this year.
Yeah, right? I remember Switzerland and Germany used to be punching bags every year.
Right? Britain is now starting to get themselves back up, right? France was there for a while and stuff like that. I love the international part of the Hall of Fame. It's fun. Again, we're not taking anything away. Like today is about Mike Vernon and Lundqvist and those guys. They absolutely should have this day. And last week, Dan Ruzanowski found out he was, winning the broadcaster of the year and Elmer Ferguson Award. There's no reason they have to come out and take anybody's thunder away, but be a little bit more inclusive and be a little bit, you want to grow the game, then give people a reason to, to feel like they're included, I think.
Yeah. And it's
solve the problem again, Ryan.
I'll say this. If anyone has never been to the Hockey Hall of Fame in Toronto, go.
Because
they spoiler, there's multiple versions of the Stanley Cup, but there's always a Stanley Cup at the Hall of Fame. And the coolest thing is just being able to sort of just go around and sort of look at the different names. You can go and find your favorite players, your favorite teams. You can see the awkward blank spot that says season not played for 2004-05. I mean, as a historical document, I don't think there's anything better in the sport than the Stanley Cup.
And I always thought it was cool, like, when I was broadcasting games, I got so many little nuggets in a trip into Toronto. Like, I went in there after the year but they had TJ Brody's gloves from the American Hockey League All-Star game. Like, TJ Brody's a great player. He's not a Hall of Famer, but he gets that moment. I was with Mike Commodore last week. I asked him, "Where's your white bathrobe from Carolina's Stanley Cup victory?" Phil grabbed it. The keeper of the cup just looked at Cami at a summer Stanley Cup party, saw the thing crumpled up in the front seat. "What are you doing with it?" "I don't know. Can I take it to the Hall of Fame?" That's how Cami's the actual green hard hat from 2004 with the numbers from
it's still there.
Yeah. Right. But there it is. Right. And so it is, if you've never been, I just think it's a magical place. I love the sport anyway, but there's so many things for so many people in there. And Kelly Massey's welcome, because you and I have just done a good half hour promoting the hell out of that venue, but it's worth it. It's a great day. Like, this is a fun day. Right.
Yeah. And these are people who, they spend a lot of time. I mean, Kelly and the staff at the Hall, like they work so hard. And, it's one of those things where, when you're curating that type of a setting, and you put in, we, as much as we want to quibble, like, I don't love the secret ballot of it. That's the one thing I don't like the Hall of Fame.
Well, can you explain that to me? Because I grew up with secret ballots, so I'm fine with secret ballots, but I know baseball in particular, it became the one where we have to print the ballot and everybody, and then we get to vet the ballot. I'm okay with secret ballots. I don't want to have to justify everything.
And I think that's the thing, because they basically don't want to have names get out and then go, "Oh yeah, we didn't think person X was good enough." Like, it's when you're in the conversation for the Hall of Fame, I think being considered is still a pretty big honor, but I can see why the optics of it were things they wouldn't like. But the baseball association does a public ballot for theirs. I mean, the PHWA, we moved to a public ballot. I forget how many years ago for the awards. And I mean, for the awards, people are getting money and bonuses off that. So I can understand the logic behind wanting to have some transparency for things that actually impact what kind of money people make. But I mean,
don't you think it's just because everybody wants to be mad? Like, you're fueling that anger department.
You contribute. You get a bit more of a conversation out of it.
So I know what you mean. In full disclosure, I voted on the Alberta Hockey Hall of Fame for 4 or 5 years, and was sat in on those and went through the process. And it's a daunting task when you're given submissions and names are rolling over and things like that. And you have these great conversations, and then you're committed to making a decision, and then 8 months later you go there and you're probably, well, why did this happen or why did that happen? And you kind of forget those conversations too, right? So I can live on either side of the street. I got a question for you. Yeah. When is the first analytics builder put in? And who would that be? Who would that be? I mean, I go with Bowman, but he's a friend of mine.
Could we go Jim Corsi?
The goalie? The former Oiler, Jim Corsi? The former goalie coach?
They named the stat after him.
Yeah.
But I mean,
but it's impactful. I would say, absolutely. That's why I'm asking.
I think it'll start once you get more and more. I think once we have like a quote unquote analytics GM win the Stanley Cup, then I think we'll have more of a conversation about it. But I mean, I think it's coming. I think it'll take a while though, but I think it's coming.
I think it's 2 decades away.
Yeah, I think that's probably fair.
Right. If you think about 2003 was 2 decades ago. So,
I mean, considering that, 25 years ago, like we thought goalie coaches were like snake handlers. Like it was just, I remember I was talking
David
to Cliff.
Marcoux.
I was talking to Cliff Fletcher about this, and they didn't like their first full, like they had Al Arbor briefly as a pro scout, but like initially, when they got an assistant coach for Boom Boom Jeffrey on in the 70s, it was heresy. No one was doing, I can't believe you have an assistant coach. I can't believe you have a video coach. I can't believe you have a goalie coach. I can't believe you're doing video. I can't believe you have a mental performance coach. All these things that every team has.
And travel.
And travel with.
And that's what I mean about Marcoux. I remember in 2003 when the announcement came out just before training camp that David Marcoux was hired as the full-time goalie coach, and he was going to travel.
Before that, wasn't it Glenn Hall? But he was sort of a consultant. He just watched the games and sort of send notes.
I thought it was Ken Reggett. I think you're right about Glenn Hall. You're absolutely right about Glenn Hall.
Glenn Hall was before Ken Reggett, I think.
Yeah, but Reggett was, I don't think, he wasn't traveling. Nobody was traveling. To your point, how can you have an assistant coach? And you want to have a lot of fun? Here's one. You can have this one for free. You want to make some people really angry, like beehive angry? Go on your radio show and say we should ban assistant coaches and have more mistakes and more fun. Assistant coaches don't like that when you do that. They really don't like that.
I think remember the first couple of years of 3-on-3 overtime when no one knew what the hell was going on, and it was basically you put out the three guys who could skate the best and said go nuts kids, and then it was just pure chaos, and then the coaches got coaches, we love you, we're not saying anything disparaging about you as people, but coaches ruined 3-on-3 overtime.
They did
because now there's strategy.
No, I remember when 4-on-4 came in. Ooh, and then they gummed that up. And you're right. It took longer.
I will also say though, the same coaches that we're ragging on for ruining 3-on-3 overtime are also the coaches that, like, we used to not have 4 forwards in the power play. Occasionally, some teams have started doing 5 forwards in the power play because it's an advantage. And I mean, it's crazy, but I guarantee you, some coach at the end of a meeting was like, "Screw it, we're doing 5 forwards in the power play because I want to see how people will freak out. Maybe it'll be good." And occasionally it's good. You just have to have the right 5 guys, right?
Yeah, you do. He is Ryan Pike, managing editor of Flames Nation, joining us today to talk about the draft. And we started, but
16th overall. I think they're going to get somebody good.
Maybe they'll get Mike Vernon. And again, if you're just, well, it's a podcast. So why would you, scroll to the middle and go, this looks like a good place to start. Mike Vernon's in. Let's talk. Okay, so the draft is coming up. You're going to join us Friday because we really do believe things are going to happen. Let's talk a little bit about the atmosphere right now in the NHL. You were on top of it today. Chris Johnston from TSN and his program was on it today. We've got kind of a sense of where the cap is going. Not much this year, but holy cow! In 3 seasons, it could be up by as much as $10 million.
Yeah, I believe at the Stanley Cup final, the commissioner mentioned that the NHL is approaching $6 billion in hockey-related revenue. They're not quite there yet, but it's around $6 billion.
Okay.
And so, if there is no escrow debt, you'd be looking at a salary cap somewhere around $90 million. But because of the escrow debt and because the NHL and the NHLPA agreed to sort of more of a staggered progression of the salary cap, what we're going to see is, this year it'll be going to 83.5. That's an increase of $1 million from the 22-23 season. Yeah. After that, the escrow debt will be paid off. And then the thing they're using is called, it's a new thing called the lag formula, which is a fancy way of saying, instead of using, the old system was, if you work for the league and I work for the players, you and I would sit down, our accountants would say, well, this is kind of where we think the revenue is going to go, maybe kind of. And then we'd look at the numbers and go, yeah, okay, sure. And then we'd set the cap based on that.
Yeah.
And the problem is that's where escrow came in because, under the terms of the CBA, hockey-related revenues have to be split 50-50. And so to ensure that between fuzzy forecasting and the 50-50 scenario, you needed to have a holdback of escrow, like when you're buying a house, of salary. And the problem is if you're, I don't know who, let's say you're Jonathan Huberdeau with your $10.5 million deal, you're not taking home $10.5 million. You're not taking home anywhere near that because under the old system, they'd hold back 18, 20%, something around 20% at some years of your money, and you wouldn't get the money you were signing for in actuality. So the big thing they took into consideration when they redid the CBA during the pandemic stoppage was the lag formula. So every year escrow is capped at a very specific number. And to make sure that that doesn't screw everything up, they, instead of forecasting based on what we think revenues maybe kind of could be in some point in the future, rainbows and wishes and unicorns telling us what the cap's going to be, it's, well, what did we make 2 years ago? So they base it on revenue from 2 years ago. So that's a long preamble of saying this year it's going up by $1 million, more likely than not. And then every year until basically they decide to change up the formula, it's going to be a 5% increase. So that means for the season after this one, 24-25, it'll be about 87.7 million. The year after that, about 92 million. And that's assuming that, nothing crazy happens in the interim. But, assuming that revenues stay, even if revenues stay flat, you're not going to see the cap decrease. You're going to see the cap probably keep going up for a while because of the US TV deals and stuff. So, you're going to, it's going to be interesting. And then, maybe, by the 25, 26 is the next one. So conceivably the Flames could be in a new building by 2026 or 2027. Conceivably Ottawa could be, conceivably Arizona in some way, shape or form could be. So, if you're a revenue optimist, as the NHL tends to like to phrase it, there are things independent of inflation that will keep driving revenues up potentially over the next few years. So, I mean, that won't be none of those things will be happening until the next CBA most likely. But, there's some optimism out there. And if you're a team right now, you're probably thinking you're going to white knuckle it through this summer and white knuckle it through this season. And then next season, pennies from heaven, cap's going up by about $4 or $5 million. So potentially, if you just get through this season, you could do a lot of things.
Yeah, and I think we're seeing some behavior adjustment because of that. Gavrikov in LA took 2 years, maybe banking on the fact that there'll be more money in the system in a couple years. I think it's probably weighing on the minds of Lindholm and Hanifin, not where they're signing, but just what their contracts are going to look like, because they still have a deal for this year. What they're negotiating right now is for a deal that kicks in a year from now. So when there's more available money, to that end, some of the things that we are hearing, haven't necessarily seen it play itself out, but one of the things we're hearing is a lot about buyouts, not so much with the local hockey heroes, but almost all the other Canadian teams. Well, we've already seen Vancouver with Oliver Ekman-Larsson, got him off the books. Edmonton, Kailer Yamamoto, Blake Wheeler's name, TJ Brode. I mean, some of this is, I guess, rumor and conjecture and somewhat silly. Are we anticipating seeing some more names get bought out? I mean, Zach Kassian and Nemeth are out.
I imagine we're going to see a lot of teams. The buyout period ends on June 30th, so I imagine you're going to see a lot of teams go into Nashville and go to their buddies and say, "Hey, you want Kailer Yamamoto for future considerations?" And Edmonton probably be happy to just get to the cap space. A lot of teams would. And so I think we're going to see a lot of potential moves like that. But if you're Edmonton, you'd love to get him off your books entirely. Your next best thing is getting him off your books without having to take a bad asset back. So, with him, I think there's something like that probably in the works. There was a rumor that was since been debunked that TJ Brody might be a potential buyout candidate in Toronto because of, I believe it's because of the structure of his cap hit. Because if he got bought out because of how his salary is structured, he'd have a $0 cap hit in the first year and a $2.5 million cap hit the year afterward, which, I mean, if you could buy somebody out and not have a cap penalty, that's fantastic. I believe if the Flames for some reason bought out Jacob Markstrom this year, they'd have a negative cap hit this year because of the way his
money
thing
back?
is structured. But there's no way the league would let them do that, though. I asked somebody and they're like, "No, that wouldn't happen." I'm like, "But it's the way that's built." So it's a weird, and like, yeah, how would the cap math work if you had someone on the books with a negative cap hit? That's just weird to me. But I think we're going to see, there's going to be a lot of speculation and a lot of conjecture until the dominoes start falling. But I think once we get everyone together in Nashville and people start talking about, okay, you can see the whites of your eyes and go, okay, you want to do this trade, you want to do this move, you want to do this, whatever. If somebody says, no, I'm not going to help you, and you're facing just a $1 million cap bump, all you can really do is say, screw it, we're buying them out. Nothing else we can do, right?
back to the local heroes. Let's deal with Noah Hannafin. This is one of those whispers becomes a conversation, becomes almost yelling. We're now dealing with a player that is being referred to as not wanting to return. Not sure that's entirely the right thing to say, but the context is the feeling is he won't sign a new contract. Your thought on the situation that the Flames find themselves with Noah?
I think he'll be moved. I think he's probably the first shoe to drop because, you want to figure out, what you can get for him. Maybe you can get a pick in the draft next week. So I think that I imagine we'll probably hear some sort of resolution on that in the near future, simply because, if based on what we're hearing from folks like Elliot Friedman, it sounds like Elias Lindholm, the Flames aren't really putting a clock on him necessarily yet. I think they sort of know what he wants, and they kind of know what he wants. And then it's just a matter of, okay, let's figure out how this is all going to work. But if you're Hannafin, or if you're Lindholm, you probably want to see what the Flames can get for Noah Hannafin. Because if the idea is like, okay, you got something really good for Noah, great. Where do I sign? If you're like, I don't know, looks like you got a bunch of draft picks and prospects I've never heard of. Maybe I'm not as hot on that idea. So I think the way I describe it is it feels like we're watching one of those fancy robots drop dominoes on the floor, and right now it just looks like kind of a mess. And all it's going to take is, I think,
what
one
did you
domino
just
to topple.
say? What are you talking about? Robot?
There's
with dominoes?
robots that lay down dominoes.
What are you talking about?
I'll send you the YouTube link. It's fascinating. There's this guy in California who's an engineer.
I was not expecting this. Okay, yeah,
but yeah,
I think I get the gist of it. There's a
lot of setup going on right now, and then there's a lot of things that could happen contingent on other things, and the Flames are still gonna have to figure out their coaching staff for next year. I think there's gonna be, I think, no shortage of things to talk about over the next little while.
I want to go back to Hannafin though for a second, and this is more of a sign of my age than anything else. I'm still kind of looking at it from just a strictly positional and filling the need, not the dollars and anything like that. If you move out a defenseman like Hannafin, do you not have to find a top 4 defenseman to bring back? Not necessarily in that deal, but does that then become? It seems to me that that's what you need to do.
The short answer is it depends, because if you're the Flames, like their top 4 last year is what? Anderson, Hannafin, Uyghur, and Tanev. And then occasionally Nikita Zadorov, but he seems like he was better suited for the third pair. Yeah. So if you bring in Oliver Shillington back from Sweden, and that seems to be what's happening this offseason, he's coming back.
Yeah.
I love Oliver Shillington. I think he's a great player. I think it's going to be challenging to throw him right in the top 4.
Yeah, I do too.
So I think that how they manage that's going to be fascinating. But I think they think very highly of Oliver Shillington as a player, and he's not quite Noah Hannafin, but he's not a gigantic drop off, and especially with how well, like we saw Uyghur and Anderson for the last 20 games of the season, 25 games of the regular season, and I thought that granted Anderson had been hit by a car, but even with a tenderized version of Rasmus Anderson, they were the Flames' best pairing. And, a lot of that goes to Uyghur, but I think both of them really held up there in the bargain. And, if you have an Anderson who's not bruised to hell and is at 100% and isn't dealing with having been hit by a car, that could be just a dynamite pairing. And having that kind of a pairing up top allows you to do other things with the other pairings that maybe you might not have been as comfortable as doing otherwise. So
in honor of Mike Vernon going into the Hall of Fame, let me ask you this. Does not part of the consideration need to be here who's going to shut down McDavid and Draisaitl?
Yep.
And I think can Anderson and Uyghur do that?
I think they can, but I think they're probably better suited for offensive generation. Yeah. I also think that, until something happens to tell me otherwise, like I thought Shillington and Tanev were a really good defensive oriented group when they were together. I think, especially with the way Shillington skates, I think of all the players, regardless of position in the Flames organization, the guy who can best skate and defend positionally, Connor McDavid, is probably Oliver Shillington. Yeah. So, I mean, it's not an ideal way to doing it.
No, I get it. And I do feel a little bit odd talking about, because I just didn't watch enough of Oliver the last year. I paid more attention this year, so I didn't see him as that much. And clearly, but people like yourself who did pay attention, have watched him, have a much higher thought process on him than I guess I still think of him as the young guy that could skate like the wind, but had big defensive holes. Clearly, he's been working on those, and he's got to the National Hockey League, and he belongs. I want to see him again. I do feel like I'm giving him a little bit of a disservice by, I don't quite see him there, but you do, and other people who I trust do. So I believe he's there. So
his mobility is going to give him so much of a chance. And, I think especially if he's mentally where he wants to be, he's worked so hard to get to this level. And I think the thing that's really going to be exciting, I think for a lot of people is, Ryan Huska has been a big believer of Oliver Shillington since he came in as an 18-year-old. He's had him virtually his entire pro career at various levels and various amounts of time.
That's right.
And, if I think I'm really curious to see if, especially after a year apart, Huska with fresh eyes and potentially Shillington with fresh eyes, can they figure out a way to unlock another gear in Shillington's game? Because if he comes back and he's the same guy as before, that's great. Because I think him coming back and being a good second pairing guy, you can do a lot of things with that. If you can figure out, especially to someone who's still potentially learning how to be an everyday NHLer, if you can figure out a way to get a little bit more out of him, then I think they have some decent options ahead of them. But I agree with you. I think the challenge is if you take out a really good left shot blue liner from your group, you need to replace him. They did with Mark Giordano. They replaced Mark Giordano in the aggregate, but they basically had to split up Mark Giordano's duties amongst 3 different guys. In order to make it work.
Yeah, no, that's true.
I think they can make it work again. I mean, Huska was able to sort of chop up Giordano's duties into those kind of chunks and spread them out that way, and it worked out pretty well. So maybe he can do it again. But I think it's going to be a tall order if Hanifin ends up playing in a different sweater next year.
So this is a BS alert. This is a rumor alert. This is me trying to be funny alert. I do not want anybody coming back and circling back and saying as heard on.
So this is the part not to clip.
This is the part not to clip. There's no chance Erik Karlsson's coming here, right?
I have no idea how the hell they fit him under the cap.
Good. That's all I wanted to hear. That's all I wanted to hear.
He fits him under the cap. I know. It's
because I just read that again. That Erik Karlsson's going to be moved.
Norris Trophy inevitable.
Yes. Oh yeah.
Karlsson.
But and when in the history of time would you have ever gotten nervous about acquiring the reigning Norris Trophy winner, not a past Norris Trophy winner, the reigning? No, at no point in history would you have ever said, "Ooh, we don't want that." But you don't want that.
Not at that number.
No.
But again, I mean, when if Mark Giordano, instead of making 6 and change, was making 8 and change, 9 and change when he won, I think we might have been having the same conversation, because I think Seattle would have been as excited about getting Mark Giordano if his cap hit was a lot worse than it was.
I don't know, because of the implications of a new team and having space that they didn't have year 2, right? If their whole idea was moving him at the deadline, which they did, maybe they didn't care. I don't know. But it's one effect. It's the robot dropping dominoes on a floor.
I'll send you the link, man. It's fascinating.
No, I trust you. I explicitly trust you. Elias Lindholm, stay or go? Does your flag blow in a certain way today?
It feels like he's staying.
Okay.
I would think if he felt strongly about get me out of here, it would have come out by now.
A la Hanifin?
Yeah. I don't even know if Hanifin's a strong get me out of here. I think the
narrative has become that, but I think that's a fair point. We don't know the concept.
Yeah, I think the phraseology has basically been like, he liked it. He likes the city, likes it here, kind of wants to see what else is out there.
Right. And teams were calling about him originally, right? Teams were calling.
Teams were probably still calling about him. I mean, if you think that you can get a Noah Hanifin, I'd call him. If nothing else, maybe Craig turns you on to something else that he wants to trade.
Like what?
I don't know. The goalie.
The goalie? Oh, yes, the goalie. Oh, yes, the goalie. The goalie. Having said that, I thought it was all quiet on the Calgary front, and then Darren Dreger and I think you glommed onto it yesterday, kind of by the way, watch Hanifin, Backlund, and Toffoli, because they're all represented by the same group.
Yeah. Can be a lot of that going on.
I thought Backlund was the next captain. I don't know.
It depends. I think a lot of these things is, it depends, because if you're Elias Lindholm, you'd love to stick around, but if the team's going to be competitive, and so you're kind of curious, okay, what moves are you going to make? Yeah. If you're Michael Backlund and you're 34 going on 35 and you haven't won anything yet, you're probably thinking the same thing. I'd love to be captain, but I also love to win something. And, Toffoli, he's won. He probably would love to win again.
Yeah.
And, if you go down the line, a lot of the guys who are probably pending UFAs, Chris Tanev hasn't won squat, probably would love to. Zadorov is, he feels like he'd be a good piece of a team that, has aspirations of doing something based on, I don't mean this as disparagement of Nikita Zadorov. He's a very good player. Do you want him on your top four? Might be above his skis a bit. He's a great 3 who can play higher in the rotation, which is a lot of teams don't have that. A lot of teams, I'm pretty sure, depending on the
why is that insulting? I don't think that's insulting. Is that insulting? I don't think that's insulting. I think it's I think it's what it is.
There's plenty of we use the term, not a first line center as sort of a drag on player. There's going to only be in terms of guys who'd be first line centers on any team in the league, there's maybe a dozen, maybe.
That is my point, and that has been my point all along about Lindholm. That has been my point all along. There aren't 32. There are 32 number one centers by designation. There are not 32 number one centers in the National Hockey League. End of story. Yeah. End of story.
Yeah, it's it's a tough league, and I think it's as you always. What's the joke? It's just an honor to be nominated. I think that if you can make it in the NHL and play enough games to get your pension, let alone at any position, I think it's a laudable achievement.
Oh, it's a credit to you for sure.
And then if you can play a good big role in a good team, I remember I always use Michael Backlund as an example of this. Getting to your potential is tough. And Michael Backlund, last season, he was an excellent third line center on a team that was not very good. He's also been a really good second line center on good teams. He's, I think if, someone like Michael Backlund, regardless of his age, with just his playing style, if he's your first line center, you're probably going, got some depth concerns. If he's playing anywhere but your first line, if he's your second or third guy, that means that the guy or guys ahead of him are quite good. And, it's all about, Peter Labardius jokes about this all the time. He uses the term slotting. Some guys, if you slot them in the right spot, can just be really, really, really good role players. And, the toughest thing, I think, for young people when they get into the NHL, you grow up, as someone who had those dreams but didn't have the hockey talent to back it up, you grow up on ponds or your backyard, dreaming of scoring the game-winning goal in overtime of the Stanley Cup final. And not a lot of guys probably dream of, okay, we need you to go out there and play 45 seconds to wear down McDavid, just keep him in the neutral zone and get him tired so we can bring out the guys who can score.
It's funny you say that, because 2 years ago, I thought Michael Backlund was exactly what he was projected to be in 2007 at the draft in Columbus. A second line, 200-foot playing center that can chip in offensively and will be very responsible in his own end. That's what he was taught. And those aren't fun. We're not talking about him. We're talking about Kane. We're talking about Van Riemsdyk. We're talking about all these other guys, because that's sexy. But at 24, wherever he was picked, that's exactly what they said he could be, and that's exactly what he became.
Right? I had a long chat with Backlund about sort of how his career trajectory, and I asked him, when did you think you were becoming the player you wanted to be? And he sort of mentioned, I think it was a year that he was under Bob Hartley. He mentioned there's a 10 or 12 game span that he wasn't on the ice for a goal against at all. Mm-hmm. That tells you a lot about what he values about being a player.
No, exactly. Right. Listen, you're going to come back on Friday because stuff's happening. But before you go, and I'm kicking you off now because I'm still trying to wrap my head around the dominoes in the machine. Tell me because I mentioned it off the top, FlamesNation, all the Nation networks, I believe, are going to be in Nashville, but tell us a little bit about what we can expect next week.
Oh, Lord. Let's see. Monday's the awards. Michael Backlund, Speak of the Devil, is one of the finalists for the King Clancy Memorial Award.
Right.
It's basically good guy on the ice, good guy off the ice award. Then Tuesday, the GM meetings where I believe they're going to also announce the NHL schedule on Tuesday for the coming season. So we have that'll be some reasonable big news. We'll get confirmation most likely on Tuesday of the salary cap number for next season. And odds are a bunch of us will corner Craig Conroy and try to get him to tell us all the secrets. Wednesday, round 1 of the draft. Thursday is rounds 2 through 7 of the draft. And then Friday, as we're all sort of leaving town in various stages of being just beat the hell by the city of Nashville, you also have the last day of the buyout period and the deadline for qualifying offers. And again, qualifying offers, if there's teams that are up against the cap, you might see a lot of interesting players not get qualifying offers and become free agents. And then on Saturday, Jerome McGinley's birthday and free agency.
It will be busy. You will be a huge part of it. We will have you back. Thank you, sir. This was fun. It was. I knew we were going to get the Hall of Fame. I didn't realize we were going to get great Hall of Fame news.
I didn't expect Vernon, but I'm very excited about it.
I really am too. I really am too. This was a lot of fun. Thanks, Ryan.
Yeah. See you Friday.
There you go. Ryan Pike, the managing editor of Flames Nation and robot domino playing enthusiast. Brought to you, of course, by the Ski Cellar Snowboard, skicellarsnowboard.com. 76 years in Calgary. 4 locations in the winter. 1 location right now, McLeod Trail by Chinook Center. We are expecting a visit from a dear friend, Dr. Tyler White, in a little while. With lots to talk about with Dr. White. But before then, as I said, let's go back and revisit this. Jack, you want to throw up the Frank clip or tweet, I should say, that talks about the Hall of Fame as this year's class, which will be inducted coming up in November, includes 3 goalies. Mike Vernon is on that list. Peter Marr and Eric Dehacek were on the show last Friday. I believe both talked glowingly about Vernon, and it's been a long conversation. It's been a long time coming, and I have no problem. I have thrown it out there before that he's a guy that should be there. Henrik Lundqvist, I believe, is the only first ballot Hall of Famer on this list from the NHL side, and not surprised. King Henrik, he played in New York. He was an excellent goalie. I mean, to say he played in New York somehow takes away from his his accomplishments. He had international accomplishments. He made a Stanley Cup final, never won a cup. But was, an MVP, just an incredible. So he's first ballot. Tommy Barrasso. It's been a while. It's been a long time. Tommy was a huge part of the Pittsburgh Penguins teams that won in the early 90s. He was, as I mentioned before, right out of high school into Buffalo, a big American goalie, put up some really strong numbers, deserves to be there. Wasn't a first ballot guy, but deserves to be there. Pierre Turgeon, unfortunately for me, I still get nightmares of Turgeon getting whacked by Hunter in the playoffs. That Washington Islanders rivalry was something else. But Pierre Turgeon was a consistent scorer, very good scorer in an era that had the likes of Wayne Gretzky and more importantly Mario Lemieux in his prime and some other really Brett Hull, that type of player. Pierre Turgeon was not them, but close, really close. And he was, not recently, just because of, I think the recency bias is always, we adapt our names and change the names. But for a long time, you would always use Pierre Turgeon as an example of a big, rangy center forward that could put up points and was very difficult to defend. We mentioned Mike Vernon, Caroline Ouellette, probably not probably, he is the youngest on this group, but her resume speaks for itself and is a no-brainer. But I kind of agree with Ryan. Not kind of, I agree with Ryan. Well, we've got to take off these artificial limits and stuff like that. It's a Hockey Hall of Fame. So, why 1 or 2? Kenny Hitchcock gets in as a builder. I think everybody my age or maybe a little bit younger has a Ken Hitchcock story. Growing up in Edmonton, he worked at United Cycle, and he sharpened my skates. Buddy that I went through with forestry school played AAA in Sherwood Park. He was his coach. Then he was in the NHL, and to be around Ken Hitchcock was just some of the, the terrific stories that came out of him in Kamloops and the Western League. And, he was kind enough to come on the show on many occasions. I remember that. But it was always fun to visit a team on the road that Ken was coaching, because his coach's availability on game day was always him sitting in a chair and everybody sitting around him. And it was BSing, and you always learned something. Like there was a pecking order. Like, he was more apt to look and talk to a Peter Maher and a Mike Rogers than he was, or Charlie Simmer than he was to me. But you learned something, and Hitch has had a great influence on the game up here. He had a great influence on the game in Dallas and some of his other stops, Columbus and St. Louis. I know that's not all of them, but and Pierre Lacroix in the builder category, and of course part of that Quebec and Colorado Avalanche organization that won a bunch of cups with Bob Hartley. Deservedly going into the Hall of Fame. No Alex Mogilny. This one, that's the one I think there's always one that seems to draw the ire of media and fans and the keepers of the game. I think Alex Mogilny will be the one this year. I think a lot of people had Alex Mogilny, signed, sealed, and delivered. And he deserves it. There's lots of former players that have played with Alex and talk about his impact and how great a player he was. I suspect he'll get in, kind of like Mike Vernon in a way. I've always felt that Mike Vernon deserved to be in the Hockey Hall of Fame. My reasons are my reasons, but they are that he won and was successful in 2 eras of goaltending. And there's probably somebody out there who's paid a little closer attention to it, and it would say maybe 3 eras of goaltending. But in 86, when he came in, and actually in fairness, so did Tom Barrasso, goalies were standing up. Like, Mike Vernon was a battler. Like, he was not a big guy, isn't a big guy now, but wasn't a big guy. But he fought like hell. And, Peter Maher brought it up last week. His regular season, or was it Eric? One of them anyway, on Friday brought it up. His regular season numbers, he was an all-star every once in a while, but, never a league leader in all kinds of statistical categories. But when it mattered, it mattered. He was there. I think you can make a really good case that in 1989, the Calgary Flames do not hoist the Stanley Cup in Montreal. By the way, the only visiting team ever to do that. If Vernon doesn't stand on his head and spit wooden nickels against the Vancouver Canucks in the first round. And I know there are Canucks fans that don't want to hear about that series, that it's a curse series to them and all of those sort of things. But it went to 7. And I can still remember glove saves by Mike Vernon, battling saves by Mike Vernon. He's down and out saves by Mike Vernon. He did it all in that series, except score. And that eventually propels the Flames into the next round. And as we know, they win. Al McInnes wins a Conn Smythe that year. But, Peter Marsh said his understanding is it was by 1 vote. Could have easily been Mike Vernon. Well, fast forward almost a decade later, in Detroit, in a new era of hockey, the start of the dead puck era of hockey, but a new era of goaltending, and there's Vernon as the Conn Smythe Trophy winner for the beginning of that dynasty, for Scotty Bowman. He's a Calgary guy. I know he had a rough ride at times in this city, with, his parents being at the games and fans getting on him, as they do with goalies. But he's a businessman. He came back to Calgary. He's in Calgary. He's an active member of the Calgary Flames alumni. It's a great story. Came back. I don't know about him coming back to the Flames part. I don't think that was as much fun for him in being in Florida than coming back here. But certainly at the front end of his career, you can close your eyes and see Mike Vernon making saves. Most of us can close our eyes and see Mika Kiprusoff making saves. I think Mika Kiprusoff might have been a better goalie. He didn't win. Got to one Stanley Cup final. Vernon got to two with two different teams in two different eras. Kiprusoff had those numbers. He had those gaudy numbers. Won a Vezina. Was that all-star and, Olympian and all of those sort of things, but I think if you have to process recency bias in there as well. And once you process recency bias, maybe he wasn't the best, but, the Flames have been blessed to have two goalies. Vernon and Fuhr in the 80s, and I guess you'd put, a couple other guys, but I think when you look at the Battle of Alberta, two guys that played in their hometowns or close to it. In the case of, I think Grant was from Spruce Grove, but you know the point I'm trying to make. Both played in the Western League, and both, would get and do. I have no idea for the life of me why people go after Grant Fuhr. Well, I do have a theory on Grant Fuhr on Twitter and talk about all the goals he gave up. Well, the thing about Grant and Mike Vernon was they may have given up more goals than goalies do nowadays, but they never gave up the winning goals. They were winners. And it's really exciting to see Mike Vernon go into the Hall of Fame. We are live in the Oodle Noodle studio. Hey, we're not just crazy about noodles. We put the same energy back into the community. 2 locations in the Calgary area. One's in Airdrie, 105 Main Street North, and 1244 17th Avenue, right down the hill from us. Pickup and delivery. Very important day today, and I want to talk about that. And it gave me the opportunity to reach out to a friend of mine, and he was gracious enough to agree to do this. And I don't want to keep him on hold very long, so we'll let you know that our next guest is brought to you by Ski Sellers Snowboard, skisellersnowboard.com. 76 years in Calgary. Their location for the summer is McLeod Trail by Chinook Center. But don't worry, in the fall, when the snow starts falling, they'll have 4 locations in town. I am very proud of the relationship I have with our next guest, but in full disclosure, I do want to let everybody know that we have worked quite closely on a number of projects, and I do work with the First Nations Health Consortium, which he is the board chair, but he's still the absolute perfect person to have on today. Today is National Indigenous Peoples Day, and we're very happy to have our good friend, Dr. Tyler White from Siksika Health join us. Dr. White, how are you?
Yes, good afternoon, brother. Doing well. Thank you.
Well, and I appreciate this was kind of a little bit on my part, probably a little late invitation, but as I got thinking about it and listening to you on a podcast today, I heard a podcast you were on. What amazed me is you were on a podcast just talking about the work that you're doing at Siksika Health and the work you're doing in the healthcare world. How much of your world is actually intersecting with sport? And I thought, you know what? Today's a good day. This is a really good day to bring you on. Obviously, you and I have a shared partnership with this project, and I wear it very, very proudly. The Every Child Matters game with the Calgary Hitmen, and I got the hat back there. Some other stuff there just pointed out. But Tyler, just build on that for a little bit, because you are, if I'm not sure, you still the only health organization in Canada that has put sport and recreation under your umbrella. Is that correct?
Yeah, thank you, Rob, and good to be here on Just a Game.
Yes.
I want to put that plug in first off, and I can see by
there we go.
The swag, that it's unbelievable medallion that you have put together by one of our own gifted beaters, Lucille Wright, just the Jedi Master of beating.
Yes.
So thank you for supporting us, and thank you for your friendship. And again, just acknowledge you for, starting this new journey that you have, and really glad to be here on your podcast, and just share with you a little bit about what we're doing. And yeah, you're right. To my knowledge, we're one of the very few, if not the only organization that has this sports and recreation component under a health organization. And you always talk about, the health benefits and, trying to integrate these programs. Well, we've actually already done it. right? Whether it be First Nation, non-First Nation, federal, provincial government, we've actually established this, and we also have other, I guess, areas that to me are also just as equally important, like disabilities.
Hmm.
We have the disabilities area under our organization, so I think we have an amazing platform to really elevate, I think, the profile, but I think also provide much needed services, and be able to work alongside like-minded partners and other organizations that sort of value this sort of model that we're putting together. So we've been very fortunate to have these great partners, whether it be universities, sports, industry, but very blessed to be in this position. Thanks, Rob.
There is there's a real connection and importance when we talk about truth and reconciliation in sport too. I know that many of us in kind of in the colonized world or in our world have just woken up here in the last couple of years to exactly what truth and reconciliation means. But it's actually written directly in there, right? The the recommendations talk specifically about the importance and the need for sport and recreation.
Yeah, there's a truth and reconciliation report that was undertaken and accepted by the government of Canada, and in this TRC report they have some specific recommendations around sports. And again, one of my mentors that I look up to was quite involved with this, Grand Chief Dr. Willie Littlechild,
Hmm.
and he's someone that I hold in great regard. And he talks about not only the TRC, but also the impacts of sports that has had on him and his life, and him being a residential school survivor, but also being able to play hockey in residential school. He talks about, if I didn't play hockey in residential school, I probably wouldn't have made it through.
Right.
So again, I think you can definitely see the importance of sports, and how relative it was for him to get through this experience and move forward, but also I think be a real leader and role model to others in terms of how you move forward and some of those challenges and barriers, but also how you overcome those challenges and barriers and come from almost a strength-based position. So I think these are, again, just some of the many friends that we've been able to have in our lives, and there are many others too that I always reflect on with great fondness, and just great appreciation for the work that they've done and the road that they have mapped out, because it hasn't been easy. That there's a lot of heartache. Um, there's a lot of issues and challenges, but also at the same time, the journey that they've been on, they've laid this sort of foundation for others to follow and to move forward in a good way. So I'm very thankful, despite those difficult circumstances.
Sport, we can talk about sport in two different ways. One is obviously the benefit of participation and what it can give you. And, you and I are both on the same page. It's something that we want our kids to be involved in, need our kids to be involved in. But maybe one of the things that I've learned the most from you is the importance as well of role modeling and heroes and being able to share those with communities that just feel disconnected or don't feel like they're part of a bigger family when it comes to the world of sport. Can you just talk a little bit about the importance of having the Calgary Hitmen come out to Siksika, or you talked about having the Flames alumni out last week at the health fair. Can you just talk why that's important?
Yeah, I think that's incredibly important. And again, I think we're just coming off Stanley Cup playoffs, and whether folks liked it or not, I think that's one thing. But incredibly proud of the Indigenous
Hmm.
players on these teams. Montour and White Cloud, just incredible role models. So it's important. Representation matters, and it's important that our kids be able to see these players and say, "Hey, we can do that." There's opportunities there, and so it's with that in mind that I think about, and I take us back to our relationship with the Calgary Hitmen.
Yeah.
And a little side story before I get into that, and I've told you this, and you've kind
I
of
know.
chuckled,
I do.
but people have asked me, so why not, the Flames or others? And I'm like, for me, the Hitmen um, were important for two reasons. Um, and I was able to see what other organizations were doing, some with success, some with not. But I really felt, okay, there's two people I really want to meet, as I begin this roadmap, with the Calgary Hitmen. Of course, obviously, one was Bret the Hitman Hart. Being a big wrestling fan, I've been
Yeah.
trying to connect with Bret for years and years. And finally, last year we were able to bring Bret Hart out to our health fair, and just, amazing role model, to be in this company of real greatness, and it's interesting because not only did we, have this visit from Bret, but also I actually got to know his family a lot better with his children. I actually have, an ongoing relationship with his children. So something, you would never expect. That's the first person, and the second person was Rob Kerr.
Yeah.
I used to
I
always
s-
listen to Rob on the play-by-play, and this guy doing many things. I'm like, I got to meet this guy. I don't know, I want to see how he is, and I want to see, what makes this guy go. And it's been an absolute pleasure, because you've been, the real fire behind the engine here. You've been a motivator, you've been a leader, and you've been a great supporter of us. So that to me, especially yourself, that relationship with the Calgary Hitmen, I think, was key, because I think you were able to be that link, uh, be open, to understanding, and be open to education,
yeah.
be this emissary, I guess, to other parts within the CSEC organization, right? And we had our challenges, of course, but at the same time, what we've created was absolutely beautiful. I think, we were able to do things that others and had never been done before. So I'm very proud of the work we've done with the Hitmen. But that whole relationship started with ceremony. It wasn't, okay, let's get together, let's, check a box here.
Yeah.
It was none of that. We made sure we stayed away from this box checking,
Yeah.
and really building a relationship. So to me, that was key. Having that relationship, having a foundation of respect and trust and appreciation. I think those are the kind of fabrics that you need for any kind of healthy relationships. And so what we created was this safe space between our organizations. And it started with ceremony, started with understanding. So from there, we created, of course, the Every Child Matters game, which I'm a little disappointed, because I think the first year we ran that game, we lost out to another organization who had a dinosaur
Yeah.
as
Oh,
a
yeah. Yeah. No, that's not a sore spot with me at all.
but we created the wonderful jerseys that I
Yeah.
think are the our top sellers. But you also see these jerseys as a lot of social justice events. Like this morning, there
Yeah.
was the reconciliation walk with the city of Calgary. Guess what was front and center? Was those jerseys,
Yeah.
right? And you see them across the country, and we have different friends of ours that come out, and we gift these jerseys away to folks that just saying thank you. But they also talk about, what does the jersey represent, and what are all the intricacies of the jersey. So this was a true collaboration. And again, you, my friend, we without your leadership, without your presence, I don't know how successful we would have been. But again, I think the results sort of speak for themselves. And I think you see the benefits of the players coming out to the
Yeah.
games, but also how this relationship has evolved. I mean, we were able to share our public health expertise with the team during the COVID time.
Yep.
We offered our guidance and understanding to the personnel, and even offering some of the addictions training, the naloxone training to the players. And again, I think that resulted in actually saving a life here.
Yeah, I
So
did.
when you talk about that relationship and what that has turned into, I mean, it's quite significant. So yeah, I'm forever grateful of what we started together with the Calgary Hitmen.
This could just turn into the world's longest love-in, because I would turn it back to you in the sense of, you talk about partnerships, and early on when we came out, and we're not even 5 years into this relationship, right? Like, it was October of 2018, the first time you and I ever met. And, we came out with open ears, and we wanted to, help, but you have this real neat ability to guide in the right way. And I use this example all the time. The thing I'm the proudest of is we moved away from these octopus games where, hey, we're going to honor octopuses. So we'll wear an octopus practice jersey and an octopus will sing the anthem and we'll show a video of an octopus. Good. Octopus Day. It wasn't good enough. We needed to do more, and we needed to use that platform. And you had a nice way of pushing us in the right direction, and eventually figured it out on our own that, sport has this interesting way of opening up conversations and allowing people. And while it seems like, it's a little bit of a gimmick, perhaps putting a teepee on the concourse at the Dome, the fact that there were elders there and people could come up and ask questions opens up a whole different dialogue. The fact that there was food in the test kitchen opens up a whole new dialogue. The fact that there were different types of dancers opens up a whole new dialogue. What I'm proudest of is, and there's only 6 original ideas, but everybody seems to have followed the path, Tyler. And these games, these efforts seem to be more meaningful now than they were 3 years ago across the board.
Yeah, certainly, we've been fortunate to, I think, create a formula or a blueprint for, how you really should move forward together, in collaboration and partnership. And yeah, there's some learnings that we've had to go through on both sides.
Mhm.
But I think the benefits and the results, to me, speak for themselves, and just how important, some of those learnings were. When I think about some of the things we've been able to share with the organizations, Hitman, Flames, we had a ceremony. That to me is very special, where we can offer ceremony to players and organizations. And we had a ceremony out at our nation where we painted the faces of all the players,
Yeah.
and staff. And to me, that was quite significant that, you know, we, we could create again the safe space, but also this trust and understanding. We didn't just do it, we explained the purpose, we explained the intent behind it. And everyone, had come up, in such a loving way and an open way, right? So to me, that just demonstrates that, we're doing this the right way. We're getting the support from all different levels, and we're creating this pathway, I think, for others to follow. I think it was last year we had the Every Child Matters traditional powwow
Yeah.
at the Saddle Dome, right?
Yep.
Probably one of the first. I know the Stampede, has their powwow, but it's different than a traditional powwow. And I remember, we had 10,000 people at this traditional powwow. That's kind of unheard of.
Yeah.
And we had a huge grand entry. And interesting enough, our good friend, Chief Dr. Willie Littlechild was there,
Yes.
and we're coming into the grand entry. And obviously, we had key dignitaries make comments, but we were walking together, and he made a comment to the crowd. He said, "Well, so honored to be here. Bring greetings from Treaty 6, etc. But I've never seen so many Oiler colors in the Saddle Dome." Right? So that was an interesting way to break the ice. But
Yeah, some things never die, right?
yeah, and I think he always used to, and our friends used to always kind of rib me about, okay, when are the Flames going to get on board here with your efforts? And again, we're coming off an incredible Indigenous celebration
Mhm.
game. Again, it's the start of this relationship. It's the start of the process. It's not the end. So, incredibly proud, to work with our friends like, Brent Dodging Horse, who I have
Yep.
so much respect for, and the work that he has done, and just taking, those values and principles and beliefs and bringing them into a hockey game. And I always say, what we're doing, transcends hockey. It's
Mhm.
way beyond hockey, but it's so beautiful that we can share our culture, our songs, our dancing regalia, even our food with folks who maybe don't have that same understanding. And we have this platform to use as an educational platform. So again, so excited and honored to be able to do that in a good way.
Has it made a difference? Is it making a difference? Will it make a difference? Because again, just reminded myself of the short period of time that, you know, we've known each other, and some of this stuff has taken place, and sometimes it takes a while, but is there is there value in this?
Well, I always say there's no quick fix. You know,
Yeah.
there's no magic wand that you're going to wave and everything is going to, be perfect. I think this takes time. This takes effort and energy. It also gives us some time to evaluate and review and see how we can strengthen different aspects of things. So I believe, when I always talk about our events, I say, well, look at, the results here, and look at, what we've created together, and look at, the education that's going on. Look at how this is influencing, I think, other teams and other organizations, even government. When I get a chance to sit down with ministers, whether it be federally or provincially, one of the very first things they always ask me is about the work we're doing, with the Calgary Flames, the Calgary Hitmen, CSEC, and the different areas. Like, I think one of the things that I'm also moving towards, and again, I think, I feel that we're doing the creators' work here.
Mm-hmm.
One of the areas that I'm feeling being drawn into and we're moving towards is, being more inclusive,
Yeah.
and again, I think during COVID, I sat on the Calgary Adaptive Hub board as a volunteer. That was so meaningful and important for me to educate myself, but also how I can support and help others. And so, we're doing things now with other teams like lacrossing barriers. With Dr. David Legg at MRU, the
Yeah.
things that he's doing over there. So these are things that to me show value and show results and show a kind of a way forward. And so I'm incredibly proud of that. I think the journey still continues. And I'm hoping that others also come on board and join us and take things forward in other ways too. And I think that's the intention. And I'm excited because, as you know, we also have a very special, group of young leaders on our nation called SN7.
Yes.
And they're youth ambassadors and peer-to-peer groups. And so again, I think, hopefully they can take on this mantra and move things forward for us.
Um, I looked last week. This is an important month. It's an important day. I look at last week. Two teams, the Calgary Surge, the Edmonton Stingers, both in the CBL, had First Nations Indigenous games. Tip of the hat to Edmonton because they had the game done in Cree. Wonder where I heard that before. We were there. We've done it. I mean, we'll get it with the Surge too. But months like this help. Days like this help, or is tomorrow the more important day? Is July the more important month?
Well, I'm glad that we can recognize Indigenous Peoples Day, and that's important. But to me, Indigenous People Day is today and every day.
Mm-hmm.
And I think everyone has a responsibility. And I think if we can, do this through sports and our collective work together, I think that's really a pathway forward. And again, we have some incredible role models out there that have, laid the pathway down, and, really honored to sort of take on, that kind of work in a special way. I think I was telling you recently about a invitation I received from our good friend Billy Mills,
Yeah, I was going to ask you. Yeah.
and and his story and his experience is just amazing. So if your viewers get a chance to Google Billy Mills, please do that. And there's a movie about him, and of course he's won a gold in the '66 Tokyo Games at the 10,000. He's the only one ever to do it in this hemisphere, anyways. But again, as an Indigenous person, just all of the experiences and the challenges that he went through as an All-American at Kansas University. And again, they have these yearly group pictures with all the All-Americans, but he wasn't allowed to be in the pictures because he was a Native American. That's what he was told. And so that led to other things for him. He became suicidal. Fortunately enough, he was able to move forward and persevere, and eventually get to the Olympics, and where he won a gold medal. And just we're just so incredibly proud of the relationship we have with Billy Mills and Pat Mills. And so we were invited recently out to the U.S. Olympic Hall of Fame in Colorado Springs. And Billy, didn't say a whole heck of a lot. He just said, "Hey, Tyler, we're out this way. You guys want to come and visit us?" And again, it's getting like a call from the president, right? You don't
You got to
refuse
go.
those kind of calls.
No, absolutely.
And so we went out there, and it's just beautiful territory. And this U.S. Olympic Hall of Fame museum is brand new. I think it was 2 years old, and he had asked me if I would be a patron to the artwork that the U.S. Olympic Committee commissioned his wife Pat Mills to do. And so that was a complete honor. And so we arrive at the U.S. Olympic Hall of Fame Museum, and then he asked me to speak. And so these are, gold medalists, these are Olympians, and I'm just, really just was unexpected, but quite an honor to address the Olympians and say a few words about the Blackfoot Confederacy and my role, but also the relationship. And then again, being asked to be a patron of the artwork. And so we unveiled the artwork together, just a magnificent piece. And now, it's getting ready to be placed in the U.S. Olympic Hall of Fame Museum. And so one of our mutual friends, Steve Mesler, who was the CEO of Classroom Champions, and his bobsled is in the U.S. Olympic Hall of Fame from 2010.
Night Train.
I meant Night Train. And I mentioned to Steve, well, Steve, you and I are in the U.S. Olympic Hall of Fame, kind of. So, just a huge honor for me and my family, and just for the rest of my family to participate in that was just very unexpected, but a huge honor. And you see these kind of leaders be able to, again, go through some of those difficult experiences, and be able to move forward and be able to educate and share his message on what he went through and the possibilities. I think, again, we have to give our youth hope. We have to empower them, we have to inspire them. So when I think about Billy and some of our friends like that, those are the things that come to mind, very much so.
But why was it important for you to do that? I mean, somebody else could have done it. Somebody else, some American could have stepped up and got the painting done. Why was it important for you, Tyler?
Well, I think, that's a good question. And again, when you get asked from a Billy and Pat Mills to come and visit, you don't question that, and I think a lot of it was based on the relationship that we've had for quite some time. And they've been able to come out as friends of ours and speak to our community and come and tour in the area. And so they've been able to see firsthand some of the work we've been able to do. And I think it was significant of them that they were able to witness this, but also just building this relationship that we have together. And so, again, such a special honor. And for them to ask me, I think, you probably have to ask them why they chose me. They could have chosen anyone else. And when I went to one of the galas of the Hall of Fame, I mean, all of the Olympians were coming to Billy. Like Billy was this, was the main draw, and there was hundreds of Olympians in this gala. And so, just a high honor, something that is a highlight for me, and something that I certainly will never forget, but also certainly something that I will pass on and, acknowledge others as we move forward.
I mentioned it. We were out last week at the health fair, 2-day Siksika Health Fair, which this was year number
21.
An annual event, but it's not. Whatever you think a health fair is, that's not what this is. I mean, this had so many. So I'll ask you one real health related question, then I want to really ask you what I want to ask you. But tell me about the health. The health machine, not the health machine, but the device that you had out there that looked like a vending machine. This is incredible.
Yeah, it's our health box.
That's what it was. Yeah.
Yes, and it's a partnership we have with the University of Toronto, Dr. Sean O'Rourke, and Health Canada, Dr. Chris Serene, who's the medical officer of health. But I actually had been looking into this for a little bit now. I had seen these their harm reduction vending machines.
Okay.
That's exactly what they used for.
Okay.
And I had seen them on some of the campuses and universities in the states, and UCLA, USC, and I'm like, okay, obviously, we have challenges and issues around
Mm-hmm.
addictions, and it's not meant to solve everything, but it's a tool in the toolbox. So I'm like, okay, let's let's research this, let's create those partnerships, and let's have one of these units at Siksika. And so this is probably one of the very first, health boxes, probably in Western Canada.
Wow.
Never mind First Nation, but non-First Nation. And so we wanted to set it up at the health fair, and it contains all these harm reduction um, tools and equipment, whether it be naloxone kits and other things, masks, gloves, tubes, granola bars, just everything you can think of to certainly support those that are going through some challenging times, but do it in a way that is not drawing attention, not you know casting any judgment,
Yep.
and so it's a new concept for sure. And again, one of the items that they were stocking this with, and they were asking me, what should be in there. And one of the questions was, well, Tyler, the items we want to put in there. One is this, flavored condoms and flavored lube, and I'm like, I didn't know how to answer that, right? I mean,
Yeah.
and
I'm sorry. What?
let me ask our community health nurse for guidance around that. And so, our team really got excited by,
Yeah.
this health box. And again, we wanted to display it in a prominent place at the health fair, so our people can, again, have some understanding of the purpose. And we'll use the summer months to educate, customize, create more awareness and promote it, and then we'll deploy it in the fall in key locations in the community. Could be at our high school, could
Mhm.
be at our homeless shelter.
Right.
We're assessing that as we move forward. But again, I think there are so many functions within the system. And again, we have folks can come to our website to get a real in-depth profile of the health box, but we're very excited to have it, Rob.
And you were talking that you might actually, this might be kind of a meeting of new and old in the sense that you might put some traditional medicines in there and remedies.
Yeah, I think that's the other aspect of this, is that we can customize these health boxes to really meet the needs of the community. And one of the things that I thought about that we would add in there would be some perhaps traditional medicines,
Hmm.
and that can come in different forms. And obviously, we'll consult and we'll get
Yeah.
guidance from our elders and traditional leaders and ceremonialists. But I think, again, the more that the community can own this and be familiar with it, I think the more success we're going to have.
Mentioned the health fair, and it had a real sports flavor to it. You had the Hitmen there, you had the Calgary Surge there, you had Calgary Minor Soccer there, you had is it I mix it up all the time. Is it Brothers Skateboards?
Cousin
Cousin
skateboards.
Skatesports. They were there. The Flames alumni were there, and pro wrestling. Pretty sure that you are the only health fair in North America that featured pro wrestling. Why was it important to have a couple of bouts at the health fair?
Well, again, we had our Hall of Famer who was MC in both events. So I want to thank you,
Yeah,
Rob,
yeah,
for not only bringing the Calgary Flames alumni, who were a huge hit for the community,
yeah.
but also MC in the Dungeon Wrestling exhibition matches. And I think both were huge draws, right? I think
Oh yeah.
when I started thinking about the health fair years ago, I'm like, we have issues of STD and addictions and teen pregnancy, and not everyone necessarily wants to talk about those important things. So,
Hmm.
how am I going to create, energy and a place where people can come in and we can draw them in, and then we can talk about those things. So I, I started using sort of the sports and maybe even the entertainment area as a means to do this. And so now you have this very unique setup of our health fair where you have sports, you have entertainment, you have different elements to draw, people into the health fair and then get them into the booths. Like we had 70 booths at the health fair.
Yep.
It's a far cry from when I first started. We had 6 tables.
Yep.
That was the first health fair. And it also just reflects the vast network that we have within the organization and how we've developed these over time. And so, having our friends from Dungeon Wrestling, Dallas Hart, and of course, his father, Bret Hart, who was very supportive of us and what we're doing together. I think those elements, including the Calgary Flames alumni, again, were huge draws for the community. I was sitting with, our guest of honor, Cindy Blackstock, Dr.
Yes.
Cindy Blackstock.
Yep.
And you were in the ring and you were organizing things. And then somebody said, ring the bell. And Cindy had this, steel, weapon in her hand.
Oh.
And I'm like, Cindy, ring it. And so she starts ringing the hell out of this bell, right? And so, we had it all in there, right? But I think, I was looking to the crowd, and just during the wrestling match, everybody was so captivated and drawn into it, right?
Absolutely. It was incredible. It was really absolutely, it was the hit. Like it was all a hit, right? It was fantastic.
Yeah. So these are things we're, again, grateful that the community can come in. And like for me personally, professionally, it's the kids. Like when I see our students come in, junior high, elementary, high school, that to me is so significant. We had our friend Lisa Bose who did a reading for the elementary kids, the very first day. So I think just trying to connect all those dots, right? So we're trying to connect all these dots that are massive when you think about health and wellness. And so for me, it's about connecting those dots. And again, the results sort of speak for themselves. And I think we have, upcoming events that I think are equally as important. So just honored that, folks were able to tune in, and we had a lot of technology that we were showcasing at the event as well. So we had a tour of our new long-term care facility that people were able to put on the goggles and actually walk through the building. So fascinating.
Yeah, it's incredible what you're able to accomplish and to go from 6 tables to what it was. And I forgot to mention Crossing Borders was there, the Adapted Hub. There was lots of sport to it, and I love that it's got to be part of health, and you're the leader in that. I texted you last night these words: "We're not done. We got more to do." What's next, Tyler? Where do we go? How do we keep moving forward here? How do we keep building bridges and doing it the right way?
Well, I think it's, opportunities, like what you're doing with your podcast, Just a Game. I think getting that message out, and I think, having, events where we can invite people to come in, to our community, or get an opportunity to go out, to industry and other places where we can, share our message. Like I'm very, pleased to see the work that, Jason Ribeiro is doing with the Calgary Surge. He's doing things the right way by getting the community involved, and we hosted him and the group, not too long ago for a very special ceremony. And, we also unveiled the mascot, where the mascot had come out at one of our invitational basketball tournaments and was doing the chicken dance.
Yeah.
The
traditional, not the one made famous by the Emeralds. The traditional.
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you.
And we had one of our traditional dancers, in the uniform, right? So I think, just continuing on the same path, continuing, to do the same work that we're doing and bring in more and more partners in place here. And I think, as you and I know, I always tell you, Robbie, there's no such thing as a dumb question. There's no such thing as, concerns or issues. You can ask me anything. And I think, just continually building that relationship. And again, I think we've started it. I'm hoping that others also take the opportunity to continue to move us forward. And you're beginning to see that in different areas. So I'm very excited by that.
Yeah, again, I always hold you and Success Health up in praise as best in class. Like, I mean, you just talked about the health box. It's the first in Western Canada. This isn't, you know, the South Health Campus or anything like that. You guys are cutting edge. But I think a lot of other groups, a lot of other communities, a lot of other nations, but also new Canadians are looking at the way that you do collaboration and do partnerships. And today's an important day. Sports is very important to us, and I'll close by the fact that we're also living through a mental health crisis, and that's such a huge part of the intention of what you're doing and the intention of what sport can do too. That, you know, again, just further to me cements what you're doing is the right way, that sport and recreation should be part of the health, that
Well,
is, we have that conversation.
well, thank you for, recognizing and acknowledging that. And yesterday I sent you a picture of the floods of 2013,
Yeah.
and we're coming up on this 10th anniversary, of devastation for us all. But in particular, this one shot was of our nation, where it was, had wiped out, probably 200 homes, but there was teepees still peeking through the top of this flood,
Yep.
and so to me that, despite the devastation, the sadness, the tragedy, it shows the strength and the resilience of our nation. And so those are things that, give me hope. And I think, there's some opportunities to learn from those experiences. And again, I want to just thank you for the opportunity to have this conversation today. And again, Robbie, just want to wish you and your team all the best here. Just keep doing what you're doing. You're on a journey as well,
Mm.
and it's an important journey. And we may not have all the answers, may not know, but I think, again, as I always say, you're doing the creator's work, and it's important work. So I want to congratulate you, Rob, and what you're doing, and just encourage you to keep going.
Well, I appreciate that, my brother. No bigger influence than you, and I, be remiss if you mentioned his name before, but Brent Dodging Horse. I can't think of two guys that have meant more to me in the last couple of years and kind of opened my eyes. Because I sometimes think that it's too easy to take these hard conversations and compartmentalize them and kind of almost minimize them when really it's about listening. Really, if you just listen. You'll hear things and we can all be in this together. So thank you. And before I let you go, thought on Mike Vernon getting into the Hockey Hall of Fame?
Wow, just incredible. So happy to have Vernon get in there. And I had the privilege of also, meeting his brother at one of our games, and we sat there and had many conversations. So just incredibly proud of Mike Vernon. And again, hopefully we get an opportunity to cross paths, and just want to offer our support on behalf of our nation. So thank you again, Rob, for today, and look forward to future conversations.
Thank you, sir. Talk to you soon.
Bye.
Dr. Tyler White, our guest, CEO of Siksika Health, chairman of the board chair for the First Nations Health Consortium, and one of my dear friends. And I again, Tyler has taught me so much in such a short period of time. Brent Dodging Horse, who was on this program a couple of months ago, has taught me so much in this time. It is National Indigenous Peoples Day, but I think tomorrow is more important the next day. And I really do believe, at least in my path, that what I've learned from Tyler, I can take in other communities and help other communities. And just, I say all the time, best in class. Like, I don't think people appreciate how good Siksika Health is, Big Stone Health up north, Muscatcheese. There's some really talented First Nations leaders and people and technicians and doctors. And the same thing, we've got new Canadians that are coming over that are making a difference. We have some institutional issues that we need to get past. We really do. But we're better together. We're better and stronger together. Of course, brought to you by our guest, brought to you by Ski Cellar Snowboard, skicellarsnowboard.com, 76 years in Calgary through 4 locations, but one in the summer, McLeod Trail by Chinook Center. We know this to be a fact. It snowed yesterday and the day before in the mountains. Not saying they're opening the ski hills, but it did snow, which should get you thinking about your next set of skis or your next snowboard or your bindings or your gloves or your helmet or your bindings. Go down and check them out. Ski Cellar Snowboard. SkiSellersSnowboard.com. Time for the final mile. A lot, actually. We are 10 years from the flood. And I don't wish to, I guess I shouldn't have said it that way because I'm not making light of it. There's a look at the dome. Thanks to our pal Rick Tulsi, put up some pictures. Where were you 10 years ago? And we were all reminiscing about this. I guess it was a summer break for me at Sportsnet, but the Flames had hired me to go to the draft. So I was in New Jersey in the draft. And on this particular day, 10 years ago, the draft was the weekend and there was really nothing to do. And Carlo and his crew didn't need me. So I kind of had a slow day. And I bumped into one Ken King. So Ken was nothing to do, was meetings, scouting meetings and everything. And we're in Jersey City, New Jersey, because the draft was in Newark and we had nothing to do. So we went out for lunch. Well, lo and behold, the place we went for lunch was a Cuban place that had a cigar bar upstairs. And Ken said, let's go upstairs. So Ken and I went upstairs. Ken proceeded to select two very fine Cuban cigars. I don't know if they're Cuban cigars. I wouldn't know. Two fine cigars and handed one to me. I had previously smoked a couple of cigars during championship runs in the SJHL and the ACAC, but I was not a regular smoker. I proceeded to make Mr. King laugh because it was very awkward watching me chew the end, trying to get the end off of the cigar so that I could properly smoke it. When he finally relented and helped me out, we sat there. He had a drink and I had a Diet Coke, and we were smoking our cigars, and we decided to go for a walk. So Ken and I, and there is no real end story. There's no ending to this story other than 10 years ago, I walked around Jersey City smoking cigars with Ken King. And we talked about everything. We talked about the devastation. We talked about the rebuild. We talked about the new building that was coming. We talked about the Flames. We talked about Vinny Lecavalier and whether or not Jay Feaster could get him. We talked about a lot. And of course, this is the draft, which the Flames had 3 first-round picks and got Sean Monahan. But 10 years ago, I walked around Jersey City smoking cigars with Ken King. So I will always remember and always cherish that memory of my dear friend, Mr. King, who was, again, I think I put this out when he passed away. Ken King never told you what you wanted to hear. Ken King always told you what he thought you needed to hear. And I had some really challenging conversations with that guy. And maybe one day I'll talk about him, like challenging conversations about that. Like he cut to the bone conversations, but also spent this incredible day smoking a cigar with Ken King, walking around Jersey City. So there you go, 10 years ago. Finally, if you want to help, we need some volunteers. This came across my desk today. We, as we mentioned, we are getting a lot of new Canadians. And one of my friends, Marion Christensen, reached out today. They need people to befriend refugee families. This is she said, 12-month commitment. But they need people to spend time, with these new families that are coming in from the Ukraine, that are coming in from Syria and Somalia, Sudan, Afghanistan. They need volunteers. So you can see the information at the bottom there, ccisab.ca/CCN volunteer. I'll post this on my social media in a little while, but I just thought I would throw it out. You guys have been terrific. You guys have been incredible. You guys have been a lot of fun throughout all of this, but whenever there's been a call to action or I brought up a community thing, you guys are always there. So I thought I would share this today. If this is something you and your family want to do or interested to do, would like to do, or know somebody who would, please pass it along on our behalf. We only make our city better by reaching out to those who are coming to us for safety and to live with us. Congratulations to the Hockey Hall of Fame class that went in, that includes Mike Vernon, that includes Pierre Turgeon, that includes Henrik Lundqvist, that includes Tom Barrasso, that includes Caroline Ouellette, Ken Hitchcock, and Pierre Lacroix. So no Alex Mogilny. but I'm ecstatic about this group. We're going to do this same show on Friday, except it'll be different. By then, we demand that there be trades in the National Hockey League to discuss. That is our demand as we go off the air today. We demand trades be made. Next Monday, I can tell you about next Monday's show. Mike Moriali, the former CFL All-Star and just outstanding Canadian with the Hamilton Tiger Cats, is now the president of the Canadian Elite Basketball League. He will join us on the show. And then from there on that week, it's going to be all hockey all the time. And I dare say likely all local hockey heroes all the time. Thanks to RJ. Thanks to Jack. Thanks to you. Thanks to Ryan. Thanks to Dr. White. It's been a lot of fun. A little bit of a longer show today. That's all right. Take 5 out of petty cash. You'll be okay. We'll see you on Friday.
When there's two sides to every coin.